I'm Noah. I'm the director of the competition. This is our pilot year, so we're very excited for you to be the first audience ever to see this final round. We have a distinguished judge, Professor Ben Morrison, who's a professor of philosophy in the department here at Princeton University. We're very excited for his participation, and we're very excited for you to see the four finalists give their presentations. I was blown away. They are Beckett Coe, Grace Glukov, Harry Moss, and Sophia Keller. Your first presenter is going to be Beckett Coe. So Beckett, come on up.
So I guess I'll just get right into it. My thesis is that it is immoral for atheists to try to deconvert truth-seeking theists to atheism. So my argument basically relies on two premises which lead to a conclusion. The first premise is that in ordinary circumstances, it's going to be immoral for us to take actions which significantly reduce others' well-being and expectation. The second premise is that deconverting theists to atheism, or at least truth-seeking theists to atheism, is this kind of action, and therefore it's immoral to deconvert truth-seeking theists to atheism. So we might wonder why I would believe the premises. The first one, that it's wrong to harm people, it just seems true prima facie. If we reject this premise, it seems like we can go and hurt people whenever we want without any consequence, and that just seems intuitively wrong. The second premise is probably the most controversial. It's going to rely on Pascal's wager for the justification, which basically, Pascal's wager says, if you have theism and atheism, this is what you believe, and this is what's true, right? So, believe true. Suppose theism is true, and you believe in theism. It's probable that you get an infinite value. You can go to heaven or something. If you believe that theism and atheism is true, then that's going to be some finite value, because after you're dead, you're just dead. It might be positive or negative, depending on the individual. Suppose you believe in atheism and theism is true. Some people think that it's also going to be finite. Some people think that it's going to be negative infinity if you go to hell or something. And then if atheism is true and you believe in atheism, then it's also going to be finite. Okay, so if we look at this, we can see that the expected utility of believing in theism is going to dominate the expected utility of believing in atheism, because no matter how small this probability is, if you multiply it by an infinite value, you're going to get an infinite utility. So yes, basically it follows from this that if you deconvert a theist to atheism, you're going to be removing this infinite utility, either to a finite value or to a negative infinite value. In any case, you're going to be reducing their well-being by a negative infinite amount in expectation, which is why we should think this action constitutes harming them. And now I just want to define some terms. So theism, as I'm using it here, doesn't just mean believing in a religion. It means believing in a religion which has this kind of reward. This reward is tied to belief in the religion. And then lastly, this religion is a live option, so basically the probability that the religion is true is not infinitesimally small. That is my argument. I'll take questions now.
Thank you. Can you just talk me through the top left box of your diagram here? In particular, whether you're talking about whether the belief brings infinite well-being or after death, or whether it's the actual fact, or just talk me through how you're thinking about it.
So yeah, basically all this is saying is that if theism is true, right, if there is a God that rewards you for believing in him, and you believe in that God, then because the God rewards you for believing in him, he might send you to heaven or something, which is where this infinite expected utility comes from.
Rewards you to any amount? Or rewards you to a large amount? Or
rewards you to an amount that would be similar to Christianity or Islam, where you go to heaven and it's supposed to be this paradise. We can expect that to be an infinite value.
Okay. Talk to me about the first premise then of your argument, which you just said was prima facie true, just seemed to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just give me some more reasons for believing it.
Yeah.
State what it is and say what the reasons are.
So just as a reminder, the first premise was that in ordinary circumstances, it is immoral to take an action which significantly decreases someone's well-being and expectation. So first of all, we might want to say what we mean by in-expectation here. And basically, in-expectation basically means we can use the expected utility formula where we multiply the probability of an action's consequence by the reward of that consequence, and then we just sum up all of these values. So if there's multiple possible consequences, we multiply all of those by the probabilities, and then we calculate the utility. So harming someone in expectation means that you reduce this equation for them. And my reason for believing this is that if you believe that it's okay to harm someone in expectation, there's no moral rule against this, then it would be basically okay to do whatever you want to someone, even if it harms them. So I could like take a gun and I could point it at you and I could shoot you, and that would harm you in expectation, and that would be okay because this premise would be false.
So you're not making a distinction here between long-term or short-term well-being, whatever. You're just talking about well-being summed over. Like, what's your presupposition there?
Yeah, I'm looking at this holistically. So over the entire lifespan, it is wrong to take an action which harms someone's well-being.
Yeah, I'm a little bit uncertain about. I mean, it feels like there's a supposition there, which I just want you to bring out, which is that in this particular case, that you don't think there's anything else that might happen in their life which would maybe outweigh the benefits here.
Okay.
Or could be equal to them. Or?
So, if we're talking about the benefits here, the benefit here is an infinite benefit.
Right. So there are no other infinite benefits available?
It doesn't seem plausible that there are infinite benefits that are available within a finite life.
Other than this, you mean?
Well, this benefit would occur once you go to heaven.
Yeah, but maybe there are other infinite benefits on offer?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you're thinking that there's the infinite benefit offered by a religious paradise or whatever after you die.
Yes.
Are there no other infinite benefits of that sort? Which might be on offer were you to take a different route. For instance, if you're persuaded out of believing that there is such a thing, maybe that could open your mind up to realizing that there are other infinite benefits around it.
Could you maybe give me an example of some kind of infinite benefit that would be available in this life?
I don't know, I mean, wine accords me an amazing amount of it's like maybe there's some incredible wine out there which is going to just offer me an incredible amount of utility.
Okay, so if this wine were to offer you an infinite amount of utility, then that would basically mean that given the choice between picking going to heaven forever and drinking this wine, you would basically not care, right? So if this wine were to exist, this magic wine where it's equivalent to going to heaven forever, and your ability to drink this wine was somehow tied to your disbelief in theism, then sure, it might be moral to convince someone away from atheism so that they can drink this wine, but that's just not the situation we find ourselves in.
So you're just stipulating that there are no equivalent.
Yes, I guess so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So imagine that you held the alternative view. Argue for that.
The alternative view that it is okay to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
And argue for it in the strongest way you can.
Yes. So how the atheist, I think, should respond to this is that we have.
I don't want a response to it. So much as I just want. What would your argument, your strongest argument, be?
For the reasons we should convert Christians.
It shouldn't be whether it's an atheist or just what would anyone's strongest argument
Okay.
be? Yep.
So I think if someone disagrees with me, they should say that we have a duty to not lie to people, and that would entail not convincing people of things we think aren't true. And then we could say that allowing someone to believe something that is to us untrue constitutes something which is equivalent to convincing them of something that is untrue. And therefore, no matter what the benefits of that would be, it would be immoral for us to convince them or let them believe something that's untrue.
So it's an argument about honesty that you think would be the strongest one?
Yes, I think an argument that we have a deontological duty to be honest to other people would be the strongest objection.
So do you think, how strong is that objection? Do you think that's true, that if you see someone in the street and you think they look ugly or something, you have a deontological duty to tell them that? Just remind me to stay away from you when I'm on the street.
So maybe
I'm not that. Yeah, sorry. You're okay. Sorry.
Excuse me. So maybe we could stipulate that that's kind of a trivial matter. When it comes to important matters about whether theism or atheism is true, those are the cases in which we have duties not to lie to people. Yeah, so I think this is a reasonable objection. It is plausible that we have a duty not to lie to people and not to allow them to believe falsehoods. But it seems like if two moral principles come into conflict, the principle that we have a duty not to do substantial harm to someone in expectation, and the duty that we have to make people believe the truth, the first principle just seems vastly more plausible to me than the second, and so it seems morally safer, so to speak, to act on the first principle than to act on the second principle.
So I'm a little unsure about how. I mean, okay, so you think it's the strongest argument against the one about.
I do,
yeah. Okay, but now go back to your original argument. So I'm worried that it's a little bit too strong. Does this mean that all theists should in fact accost everyone they meet on the street in order to convert them, since that makes available this infinite utility? And there's going to be, according to the kind of argument you've just run, that means that there'll be no possible counter-argument available.
Yeah, so I don't think this necessarily entails that theists have an obligation to go evangelizing their beliefs to atheists you see on the street. And my reason for this is basically there is a difference between actively causing a harm to befall someone and allowing that harm to befall them as a consequence of their own actions. It might be, we can think about this through an analogy, like the one I gave at the beginning, where I point a gun at you and I shoot you. That's definitely wrong. I would hope.
Yes.
But if someone is playing with fire on the side of the road or something, it might be good to stop them from doing that. I don't think the obligation is as strong to stop them from doing that than it would be not to shoot them, essentially.
Okay, so you think that there are going to be cases, like maybe you see a kid playing with fire by the side of the road, then presumably you think it would be your obligation to intervene.
Yeah, so if the theist thinks that there's some, very strong argument that the atheist is not considering, it would be okay for them to go and convince them of theism based on this argument.
But what about, I'm thinking of kids in particular, so you see a kid on the street, you know that it hasn't formed its mind up, it hasn't made its mind up yet about these religious matters, and that it's in grave danger of being harmed considerably, according to your construction.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess what you're getting at is that if my argument is true, it seems that there's this maybe unintuitive implication that we have to go and basically evangelize to people when our gut feeling says that that's not the case. Is that
Something like that. Yeah.
okay? I mean, if one thinks that the first premise doesn't only entail not harming people, but also that we have an obligation to lead people to the best expected situation for them, I would honestly be willing to just bite the bullet here and say, okay, yeah, you should go convince the kid to, not play with fire, or analogously to believe in theism. I don't think that really has much of a bearing on the conclusion of my argument, though. I don't think that the fact that the first premise entails some unintuitive consequences is enough to justify that the premise is false.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the small probability multiplied by an infinite value. So, suppose you don't operate here with an infinite value but just a very large value. How does that change your argument, if at all?
Yeah, so if this was a very large value but not an infinite value, I think it would substantially alter the argument, because then this infinite value could be reduced significantly by low probability. And my pushback to this would essentially be that this should be an infinite value. I don't think that it's rational to believe that this is a very large value, and I'll give my argument for that. So, presumably, if you go to heaven, most religions believe that, or at least the ones that believe in heaven, believe that you're there for an infinitely long amount of time. If this was a finite value, it would seem that at some point, more time in heaven would not be any more good for you, which just seems wrong to me. So therefore, if you're going to spend an infinitely long amount of time in a maximally good place, I think it follows that this value should be infinite.
So you think that the goodness of something can be increased just by it going on for longer?
I think so.
Right. So that's an assumption which many philosophers have doubted. So you think, for instance, a movie that's 2.5 hours long, which is really good, must be better than a movie that's 2.25 hours long and is really good, is equally good?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a disanalogy here in that if the movie goes on for long enough, it might start to, I don't know, the director might start to lose the plot or something.
To stipulate that it's as good a movie as...
Yeah, so if the movie stays as good throughout the whole movie, I think then yes, the longer movie will be better than the shorter movie.
Is that really the case? Just sort of justify that.
Um,
Is this basically a pleasure argument? You're thinking you get more pleasure because it goes on for longer? Is it true of pleasures that they're better because they go on for longer?
I think it is, yeah. I think everyone would prefer to have a longer duration of pleasure than a shorter duration of pleasure.
I mean, argue against that?
Argue against the fact that pleasures are better the longer
Yeah,
they go on.
so you're just sort of like stating that. Imagine that you had to justify the opposite.
So there is an argument from like a diminishing value. Basically, with things like money, you know, the more money you have, like let's say you have $1 million, $2 million isn't always twice as good. It seems that money kind of diminishes in value the more you have. And it could be said that the same is true of pleasures, where, I mean, let's say we have, this is pleasure, right? And this is time. Instead of increasing linearly, one might think that it increases asymptotically, and that at some point it just stops getting better. So basically, one might think that you can never go past this value, this asymptotic value.
Right. What would be reasons for thinking that? So
Uh,
what are the reasons for thinking that pleasure is in fact like that?
Is in fact like the
Yeah.
conception.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just sort of like some everyday cases which might suggest that.
yeah. So I've already pointed to the money case where more money doesn't make you
Yeah, I
happier.
think pleasure then in
Pleasure,
particular. Yeah.
pleasure in particular.
Unless you're saying money just is a pure pleasure.
Some people maybe.
For some people.
I don't know. There's like food, for example. If you really like eating food,
Right.
it seems like the more food you eat, it's not going to increase linearly the amount you enjoy it. We could go back to wine, maybe.
What a good idea, yes. Okay. So now, why doesn't that apply here?
So, we might think that in a maximally good place, pleasure would increase in the best way possible. And I think we would agree it's better for pleasure to increase linearly than for it to increase asymptotically like it does. Therefore, I think we should think that in heaven it would increase linearly like this.
I mean, I'm a little unclear why you think that's the best way for pleasure to...
Well, it could increase like exponentially, which would
Make it
only
better.
make my argument better.
Right. But I guess I'm thinking something like the following. Here's a question for you. Which is better, to have one pleasure, like one infinite pleasure like you're talking about, or an infinite number of finite pleasures? And how would you argue that one is better than the other? Because you may think, well, the thing about an infinite pleasure is it rules out me ever doing anything else, you know, whereas maybe if I have wine and the food and go to an amazing movie that's 2.25 hours long rather than 2.5 to free up time to do some other things too, other amazing things.
Yeah, so I think that it is plausible that a variety of pleasures is better than just one instance of maximally good pleasure. On the flip side, you could argue that we just don't have the ability to comprehend how good a maximally good pleasure is. I don't again, I don't think that really.
Sorry, we don't have the ability to comprehend it, but you have the ability to run an argument presupposing it.
Yeah, I don't think those two are mutually exclusive.
So you understand it enough, you mean, to be able to argue about it,
Well, we can.
but we don't understand it sort of from the inside.
Yeah, from the inside,
Right.
intuitively.
Mm.
Which version of pleasure is better, though, I don't think has a bearing on my conclusion, because if you would sum up an infinite amount of pleasures over an infinite amount of time, it would still aggregate to an infinite value, which is all I need for my argument to work.
That this would be an alternative source of that infinite pleasure, other than the theistic one.
No, so if you're thinking about worldly pleasures, right, and
Yeah.
you're thinking that multiple pleasures over the course of a life can add up to is that the objection?
The objection just is, yeah, that maybe there are other, I mean, going back to a former objection, which is maybe there are other sources of infinite pleasure, other than the theistic one. I'm just wondering how that affects the argument. Maybe it doesn't.
I don't think it affects it too much. You could posit that, like, I don't know, there's some third possibility here. This is like the infinite pleasure that we're talking about. I don't know exactly what that would be. It seems, if it is the case that there is an infinite pleasure that exists in this world, it's very, very small. And a lot of Pascalians think that if the case is sufficiently small, such that it becomes a non-life option, you can just throw out the case in order to preserve your ability to make decisions based on this kind of mathematical reasoning.
All right, that's all the time we have. Okay, we just have a few minutes before our next competitor starts, so you can talk among yourselves, but I guess try not to talk too loud.
Do you want me to switch phones now, or keep this running?
Another phone?